Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. This is Izzy at Minerva. In today's video we are going to look at how to create a shaped waistband. Now this is going to be one continuous long waistband that goes all the way around the skirt. It's going to be made of one piece of fabric only, and we're going to have quite a lot of fun with this little technique. If you've been following along on this series, you'll know that we're just doing a focused video today on the shaped waistband, but you can apply this principle of pattern drafting, the shaped waistband, to either your skirt or your trousers, or even ultimately your dress if you wanted to tweak it a little bit. So you go and grab your block, whichever skirt pattern or trouser pattern you're looking to use, and the principles that I'm going to demonstrate in this video can or be applied to any other garment. In this video, I'm going to show you how to draft out the shaped waistband, and then I'm also going to show you how to sew it into a garment. For me, I'm just going to use a skirt. For you, obviously, you may be using trousers. To follow along in the video today, you're going to need your block of your skirt or your trousers. You're going to need some tracing paper, some sharp pencils, your fabric, a pattern drafting ruler, your sewing machine, obviously, and some scissors. So let's get started. Great, so in front of me I've got my skirt block. This is just my standard skirt block. I've made no alterations to it. What I want to do is to measure off the depth of the waistband that I want to create. I've decided that I want my waistband depth to just be 5 centimetres deep. So on your skirt front, just mark off that measurement that you want, whether it's 5 centimetres or more for your waistband, and then just find a nice gentle curve. Now for you, I'd recommend you're using a pencil. In this scenario, I'm using a fat marker pen so that you can just really clearly see on the video what I'm doing. Repeat the same process on the skirt back. At this point, it's quite helpful just to pop some labels on the skirt piece, because if you accidentally cut them out and then you lose them and you forget which order they go in, it can be very confusing. So let's do that together now. This is our centre back, so a nice CB for that. This is skirt back. Just going to put like a little SS here for side seam, and we know that this is then the centre piece. Let's just do the same for the skirt front. This is our side seam, our centre front. At this point, you can go off and follow whichever pattern you're using for your bottom of your skirt or the bottom of your trousers. It really doesn't matter. For the sake of this video, we're just looking at the waistband and how to construct that and how to add it in. But fundamentally, whichever block you're using for your main piece of your garment, you must make sure when you're pattern drafting that you add your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance to the top, because you'll need to be attaching your waistband on to the top of your garment, of this section of the garment. So I'll let you go off and draft out the remaining bit of your skirt down here. Don't forget the top seam allowance. The next thing I want us to do is just to cut out the spare volume, because when we sew the skirt together, these bits these are the darts and they'll be sewn together. So I just want to remove that volume completely from the waistband. At this point, you can remove that volume and just stick these two pieces of your waistband block together. Repeat that process for the skirt back. Now, we have a little bit of maths to do with our pattern piece for our shaped waistband. This is not complicated, but I'm just going to take you through step by step exactly how to do it. So follow along now and let's have some fun. We've taken our skirt front and our skirt back pattern pieces from our skirt block. So we know the depth that we want that to be, and we know that this is only half of the skirt front, because obviously you would cut that on the fold normally, and likewise the skirt back is only half the skirt back because we'd cut it on the centre fold. Now the pattern piece that we actually want to create is going to be one long waistband. So effectively, it's going to look something like this. And at this point, this will be the side seam. Just going to put a little SS there. for the side seam. This will be the front, and effectively that will be our centre front. This will be our back, and that will be our centre back line. So effectively we've got one long pattern piece where we've got the front side seam and the back side seam are then going to kind of join all the way around. Now we've got a curve along here because our waistband is curved, and the bottom of the waistband is wider than the top of the waistband. You can see that happening here on that pattern piece, even just that bit. The circumference or the length of the bottom of the waistband here is longer than the length of the waistband at the top. And that's just because it's following the shape of our hips as it goes from the waist out to the hips. So how do we get from here to something that looks like this? To start off with, we want to work out what this measurement along here is. So this is the skirt front, and it's the top of the waistband at this point. So grab your tape measure and just walk that out. Make a note of that. So on that half, for me it's 18.8. Grab your calculator. Just times that by 2 so that you've got the full opened up waistband measurement, and make a note of it here. So this is our top waistband front, 37.6. Now that's my measurement. Your body measurements will obviously be completely different because everybody's body is completely different. We're then going to repeat that process of the top waistband at the back. So that is this overall measurement here. So once again, grab your tape measure and just measure along the top of the back piece of the waistband. Once again, measure it a few times just to make sure you're getting that nice and accurate. So for me, the measurement of my skirt back for half of it is 19. So measure the top of the back of the waistband, and then just times that by 2 to get the overall. So in total, the length of the top of this new pattern piece that we've got here is going to be the top back plus the top front. So tap that into your calculator, whatever your measurements are. So the top back plus the top front, and just make a note of that. Okay, so now we've worked out the dimensions of the top of the waistband. We now want to work out what is the length of the bottom of the waistband along here. We're just going to use a very similar method using the exact same sort of measurements. So we'll first of all work out the bottom of the waistband at the front, which is this bit along here. So just walk out that tape measure along the bottom. Don't forget to do it a few times. For me along there, it's 20.4. So whatever measurement you've got there, times that by 2 to get the overall complete length of that piece. So bottom waistband front is 40.8 centimetres. Great. So the next thing we need to do is just work out this one here. So what is the back bottom waistband length? Tap that measurement that you've just taken and times that by 2. So now we've got the front and the back of the bottom waistband. What we now want to do is just work out what exactly is the entire length of the waistband at this point. So it's going to be this number plus this number. Now the next step that I want us to do is to work out what is the difference between the top and the bottom overall. So that is the total circumference of the bottom, which is this one. So that's, for me, 83.8 minus the top circumference of the waistband, which is 75.6. So let's tap that off on our calculator. and we get a difference of, for me, 8.2 centimetres. Perfect. So based on those basic calculations and our little sketch that we've done of our waistband, we can now start to actually draw out that pattern piece nice and accurately. So let's start to do that now. We're going to start to draw a new pattern piece, but we're still going to have to manipulate that pattern piece a little bit to get that nice soft curve. To start off with, just draw a nice long line that is the same length as the top of your waistband pattern piece. For me, that's 75.6. For you, it will be something different. Next, grab your pattern drafting ruler and just draw the width of your waistband, which for me was 5 centimetres, and just draw that in at both ends. And finally, complete that rectangle. Now at this point we've got a nice rectangle shape, but it's not curved like this. However, I do want us just to mark on the critical points of where the side seams are. So if this is the front of our waistband, I want to mark out where the side seam is, which for me is 37.6 centimetres along the top of the waistband line. And you can label that your side seam. Just for clarity, add some other annotations to say it's the front and the back. What we're going to do at this point is add some volume into the bottom of the waistband. So we're going to start to just crank open the bottom of the waistband so that we've got the length that we need for that waistband to sit and fit to the skirt nicely. Our rectangle currently that we've drawn is the same dimension at the top, the same length at the top as it is at the bottom. So we're going to divide our skirt front into 3 equal parts. So take the measurement of your skirt front and divide it by 3 and mark out what that is. For me, that's 12.5. And let's do that for the back as well. So my back measurement is this one here, that's 38. For you, it will be something different. Top waistband back. Take your top waistband measurement at the back and divide it by 3. Again, you should be using a nice sharp pencil at this point. We're just using a fat marker pen so you can see them on the screen. At this point, grab a pair of scissors and just cut out that pattern piece. Once you've cut out your pattern piece, I then want you just to cut and snip along these lines that you've referenced here, but just leave a pivot point up at the top. And what we now want to do is work out how much we want to pivot these little gaps out by to give us the required length of our waistband along this point here. So you will know from your little sketch and from your calculations the length that you need to have for your bottom bit of your waistband pattern piece. Now, we also know that the difference between the bottom circumference of the waistband minus the top circumference of the waistband is whatever number you've got here. For me, when I take 83.8 and minus 75.6, I get a difference of 8.2 centimetres, which means that the length of my bottom compared to my top is 8.2 centimetres longer. So in order to get my waistband to be the appropriate length, I've got 5 locations that I can add volume into, and I want to add the volume equally into each of these little segments. So take your bottom circumference minus your top circumference, and whatever that measurement is there, divide it by 5 so that we can work out how wide each of these bits need to be. For me, it's 1.6 centimetres. For you, it will probably be something different. So grab your ruler and then just open up that gap there by whatever distance you need to, whatever distance you've got there. Next, move along to the next little opening and open it by the same amount again. And just continue that process for each of the openings. Now at this point, it's quite a nice idea just to soften these curves a little bit. These are all very straight lines and we've just got some little pivots here. So maybe just draw in some nice gentle curves just to make that a little bit softer. And once you've got that nice gentle curve all the way along the top, I'd just repeat that process for the bottom as well. You could just mark off points where you know it needs to be 5 centimetres along from each of those points to make sure the width is staying the same. Okay, and now we've just got a lovely, smooth, gentle curve to our waistband. So now we've done all those tricky little bits, we can actually now draw out our pattern piece using our tracing paper and add our seam allowances. Add your 1.5 centimetre seam allowances to your sides. And then this is the easy part really, we just want to add a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance to the entire length of the top and the bottom of the waistband. Don't forget you're following the nice gentle curves that you've just drawn as a nice guide on your pattern piece. Brilliant, and then just find a nice soft curve. At this point, I'd mark a notch where your side seam is. That's going to help you when you cut it out and attach it onto your skirt. And likewise, I'd do the same down at the bottom down here. Now our grain line on this pattern piece is just going to run across the pattern piece at right angles to the side seam here, which will result in some of it effectively at the front and the back being cut on the bias. We just want to label this. We're going to want to cut 2 of these pattern pieces so that we've got the inside and the outside both looking really nice and neat. You're also going to find it helpful just to label this as the front and this is the back. And once you've done all that hard work, you can just cut out the pattern piece and we'll then cut it out of fabric. Now that you've cut out your pattern piece out of your fabric, we're now going to start to sew it together. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to sew along the top of the waistband and just get those 2 pieces together. So I've labelled mine with the front of the right side is there, and that's the right side facing up, and the corresponding front right side is facing up on that side. So with right sides together, I just want you to pin all the way along the top. Nice and simple. And then we're just going to sew it in place using our 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. We're going to attach our skirt to the waistband in a minute, but before we do, we just need to do a little bit more prep to this waistband, which is that we just want to press the underside of the waistband, the bit that's going to touch our skin, up and over the seam allowance so that it just stays nice and clear of the seam allowance when we're attaching our skirt onto our waistband. The other thing you may well want to do is just to snip out the tension along this curve. So we push the seam allowance up towards the underside of the waistband so that that's going to be on the inside, touching our skin at that point. So what you may also want to do, just to do a nice finish, is to understitch the seam allowance to the waistband at this point, which will mean that as we've pushed the waistband up towards that side, towards this side here, if we then just do a line of stitches just to the inside of the waistband, we'll then make sure that we're catching that seam allowance nice and flat to the waistband. This step is completely optional, do it if you want to, but if you are going to do it, then I'd recommend you just do a stitch length of 1.6 or 1.8 mil, which is our top stitching length, which is also the one that we use for our understitching. So as you can see, we've just stitched the seam allowance to this side, just a couple of mil away from the folded edge of the fabric. Now on the inside, what that means is we've got our seam here where we sewed our two pieces of fabric together, and then this line here, which we've just sewn, is holding the seam allowance down to the inside bit of the waistband. So effectively, once our waistband is finished, we're going to iron it like that. This will be on the front, so this is the bit that you'll see. The rest of the skirt will be hanging down here. And on the inside of the skirt, it's just helping to hold it all nicely in place. It's a really nice little detail finish, that one. So that's an optional one. The other thing you may want to do if your fabric is incredibly thick, or just a little bit medium to heavyweight, is that you may also just want to trim down the seam allowance on the inside, just to take away any of the excess volume, so you don't get like a really big like lump here where the seam allowance is inside the waistband. So if you're choosing to do that, you will want to cut away the inside bit of your waistband, which is the bit that's touching the bit that's going to go on the inside next to your body. So for you, that would be this one here that you just want to trim, in half like this, and continue all the way along. Now that we've got our waistband ready, it's time for you to grab your skirt or your trousers that you've already drafted, and we now need to attach our waistband to our skirt. Now for me, I've just used our panel skirt that I've drafted in another episode, but you will obviously have your own skirt or your own trousers, but however the principles are exactly the same. So this is the right side of our skirt facing up, and we want to attach this bit to that. So with right sides together, just line up the waistband with the skirt. Now this should fit absolutely perfectly because we cut it at the same point on the pattern piece. Forget about that. Don't forget that you've got your notch as well for your side seam. So pop that in place and that will just help you. Now, your waistband is curved and your skirt or trousers may not have such a strong curve. So you may find that you're just sort of trying to really ease that skirt piece into or onto your trousers. You can see it's kind of curving up there, but what I'm doing is I'm just getting the pins and marking halfway points between two pins that I know are in the right place, and then just halving that distance again, and that just sort of makes sure that everything's even and evenly distributed along that line. Once you've done the front, you can then just repeat that whole process along the back. Don't forget, if you're pinning darts, that the darts always need to point out towards the side seam. So just make sure as you're pinning that you're catching those darts and ensuring they're facing the right way. Otherwise, when you're sewing with your sewing machine, the machine may just kind of accidentally send them the wrong way. Then just sew the waistband to the skirt using your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Excellent. Once you've done that, just push that seam allowance and press that seam allowance that you've just sewn, your skirt, onto your waistband. Push it up in towards the waistband, up that way. Once you've pressed that seam up, the next thing we want to do is just to look at the top of this waistband, because effectively what we want to do next is roll our waistband down and over, catching that seam, making sure it's tucked inside our waistband for a nice neat finish. However, you'll notice we've got a raw edge down here of our waistband. So effectively, when it goes on the inside, we want to roll up and fold our waistband 1.5 centimetres under all the way along, so that it's going to give us a nice neat finish at that point. So Pop back to your ironing board and roll that up by 1.5 centimetres and iron that in place. Now at this point you've got some decisions about how you want to finish your side seam in terms of how it's going to close up. I'm just going to add an invisible zip into my side seam, but you may well have buttons or you may be doing some other type of closure, so you decide how you want to finish that off, but this is the moment that you want to do it. So we've got our waistband here and we've got our opening of our skirt at this point here. If you're inserting your zip, you want to just make sure that the top of the zip extends only up to the top of the waistband, because this is going to be rolled under like that. So don't send your zip all the way up to the top like that, because that bit will be tucked under and it will end up looking like that. So your zip just needs to attach, and make sure that the top of your zip is lining up with the halfway point along the width of your new waistband. So off you go and do that however you want, and come and join me for finishing the waistband once you've done that. At this point, turn your skirt or trousers the right way out, facing out. Now on mine I've got an invisible zip sewn into the side seam, and what I want to do is just flip the top of my waistband over and just pin it in place along this short side here, making sure that I've got the waistband turned up the appropriate amount here down at the bottom. We're going to do the same on the other waistband side. And now at this point we're just going to sew down here and down there so that we're encasing the raw edge of the zip into the waistband. So you may want to use your zipper foot in order to do this and to make you able to sew a bit closer to the teeth of the zip. Turn the garment inside out so that you can see the waistband and just finish that off really nicely. So we're going to turn the waistband so that it is the right sides are all facing outwards, and we should have some nice sharp corners by edge of our waistbands. So the next thing that we want to be doing at this point is just pinning and stitching this waistband down to the inside of the skirt so that it encases the raw edges of the seam. So you can do that in a number of ways. I'm just going to pin it to start off with all the way around, just so that it's nicely pinned in place. As we're pinning the garment, we're just making sure that the bottom of our inner waistband is just covering this line of stitches nicely. Now at this point, when you've got to here and you've actually pinned in your inner waistband to the inside of the skirt, you've now got a few different options of how you could finish this process. So the first thing is you could just hand stitch all the way along this bit here, and that would mean that the stitches will not be showing on the right side of the garment as you're wearing it. You just really carefully sort of capture it. The other thing that you could do, now that our inner waistband has covered this stitch line here, you could actually sew it with the right side facing up, and you could just stitch in the ditch all the way along this seam here, and that would then fundamentally catch the inner waistband and hold it down as well. So you've got a few different options to choose how you'd like to finish that. It's completely up to you. The only thing I would say is this is a great opportunity now to remember to pop a label into your waistband at this point here at the middle of the back if you're planning on doing that, so don't forget to do that. And there we have it. I might just add an extra pin or two just to really firmly hold it in place. If you've chosen to stitch in the ditch along with me, then change your stitch length from 2.5 down to 1.6 or 1.8, whatever your top stitching stitch length is. That's just your personal preference. I would thoroughly recommend that you do this really slowly. Just really focus. If you've got, controls on your machine that can take you right down to the slowest speed, do it at that speed. There is no point in rushing this, and you want to get this as detailed and accurate as possible. So let's go for it now. Beautifully done. You've got a lovely seam allowance there, stitched in the ditch all the way around. It's looking great. And on the inside, you can see that we have captured all of our waistband, and we've also got in our little Minerva label. So that's perfect. Well done. So that looks really good, eh? Okay, so here we have our shaped waistband. You can see it's all beautifully finished, and you can see the shape of it is just popping into the waist as we would expect for something like this. It's just fitted onto the panel skirt in this scenario, and we just added an invisible zip down one side. So looking great. So well done on completing your shaped waistband. That was quite an experience in terms of learning how to draft that really big long shape for your waistband, how to attach it, and doing the stitch in the ditch, and thinking about how the zip might be encompassed into that whole finished garment. I hope you really enjoyed that. That's definitely a technique that you can use on so many different projects, and depending on the width of the waistband that you choose to insert and put into your garment, you can get some really nice dramatic effects. As ever, we love to see your makes here at Minerva, so please do create a free account on our Minerva website where you can upload your own photos and join in with the Minerva Maker community. And if you've been following this particular pattern drafting series, we would love to see your creations, so please do upload them, your work in progress, where you're up to. Let us see what you're up to, because that's always really fun. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've had loads of fun, and I will see you next time.